going on? You're listening to another episode of the What is Humans podcast with Shane Strunk and Dennis Kluba. This is your first time listening. This is a personal development podcast that Shane Strunk and myself, Dennis, have put on for about 2 years now, where we discuss different topics that are going on in our everyday lives and talk about ways that we can get better personally, and hopefully you at home can also take some things away and add and apply them to your own life as well. And most importantly, we're experts in almost nothing.
What's up, dude?
Hey, man. How are you doing?
Good. I'm excited to be in this space today. We won't be able to tell on camera, but we've been making some improvements on our setup. We're pivoting to a guest model moving forward. So not today, obviously, but the space just feels so much more comfy and cozy comparatively.
Yeah, we've just been slowly adding pieces over the past couple weeks, and every time we sit down, we just get more and more excited, I think, to be in this space, which before, obviously, if you've been listening for a couple years, every time, for the most part, has been pretty minimal.
It's just
mics,
two chairs. And
chairs. Yeah, and so we're kind of investing now, especially with having guests, in just making sure the space is warm, inviting, and a place, that people
want it to be like a living room.
Exactly.
Feel. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's important for us, especially talking about bringing on guests and what the topic today about admiration versus aspiration and what that means and what are the differences between the two words.
Yeah. So that's funny. We were talking about all this before.
Yeah.
I think we've, throughout the history of this podcast, however many episodes now, we've often found inspiration in other thought leaders and books we read and articles we read. And we've often admired others. And thinking about growing up as a child, you admire your heroes. You have
athletes,
celebrities, people you see that you put on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And there's this interesting idea from another podcaster that we reference often. Rich Roll had Stephen Bartlett on, and he talked about this difference between admiration and aspiration.
Yeah.
I thought this was interesting because I see myself choosing things off of admiration instead of what is it that I truly aspire to do. So the difference is, and you correct me too, is admiration is more doing something to be like another, versus aspiration is something more focused around your passion, your desires, your goals, and something that you'd be able to do.
Yeah, I definitely think that's aligned with the way that I'm seeing it. This admiration definitely is kind of admiring who that individual is and the success that they've achieved, and recognizing that you want something similar to that. But then your aspiration is recognizing what is the thing that you want to do that's aligned with you, not just looking at the results that somebody else may have already accrued.
Right.
Yeah.
It's do you truly want the admiration that person or that doing this thing after you accomplish something brings?
Yeah.
Or is it something that you truly love and value? Because the example is say you're a public speaker, you give a talk, and someone comes up to you and it's oh, I want to be just like you.
Yeah.
But truly, they might not be after public speaking. Maybe it's just the love and respect that's given. So that's kind of the question I think we're going to have to ask ourselves in this topic is what is it truly that's driving you to make you want to do this? Is this something you admire or something you aspire to do?
Yeah. No, I think this is such an important conversation, especially the amount of conversations that we've had on discerning what our vocation is going to be in life. If it's your purpose, your thing that you choose to kind of, service the world. A lot of times I think that as children, and I don't think this is wrong at all, I can totally think to myself of wanting to play for the St. Louis Cardinals growing up.
Sure.
Because I love, people just love them, and I liked playing baseball at the time. And I think it's even funny that by the age of 10 years old, or you talk to kids now, you grow out of those things pretty quickly. Maybe it's because you understand that, oh, I'm not as good at baseball as I thought I was.
Yeah, or maybe you just don't love baseball
Exactly.
like you thought you did.
Yeah. And I think that most of the times, like anybody, what we see at face value is the end result of years of hard work and dedication. And I think it'll be an interesting side conversation that we have within this about social media and the way that maybe we're able to see a little bit better into people's daily lives and what that looks like, but also the unfortunate side of people showing you a highlight reel of their life. And it's like, oh, I want that life.
Yeah.
But if it's producing content or podcasting, it's like, okay, how many hours went in to get to the 100,000 followers that you're at now?
Sure.
It might have been 3 years in the making, you know, and it's like, do you really want a podcast, or do you really want to have 100,000 people that admire you for podcasting?
Yeah, that's I love the term you used, like a highlight reel.
Yeah.
Of the greatest hits, let's say.
Yeah.
And I do this too. I mean, we're both podcasters. You know, we admire other podcasters. We want to improve. You know, we're ambitious, I would say.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, we always have to try and remember, you know, why we do this. It's like we love the interesting conversations and the growth that's within that.
Yeah.
So when seeing something that interests you, where do you think about like is this something I should truly do, or do like I need to halt, you know, slam on the brakes and think about this? Like, what's like the decision criteria between these two, admiration and aspiration?
One thing that I read an article right before we talked about this today that was on the same topic and idea, not from the conversation that we had both listened to on the Rich Roll podcast, but it was talking about kind of the three ways that we determine between those two things, if it's admiration or if it's aspiration. I don't remember all of them, but the one that really stuck out to me was, would you be willing to do this thing even if you didn't get the praise that you deserved, or, you know, whatever? Nobody noticed. That's like step 2. Or worst case, you know, people make fun of you for it.
Yeah. Let's throw another one then in there, to do it for free.
Yeah, do it for free. And that's where it's like, I thought that it was an interesting discernment that writer made, which was about, most people, I think, can wrap their heads around, oh, I could do that for nobody to see, nobody to notice. I think it's even harder when you put yourself out there. It's like, would you do this even if people laughed at you? And think about how many people, if it's like people at a young age say, I'm going to be a professional baseball player. Right. Originally, people probably laugh at that person. But, you know, they do it, dedicate time, effort, years, then they make it. Then nobody laughs, right?
Right.
And so discerning if it's an admiration or an aspiration is like, okay, would I want to do that even when people are laughing at me and I'm doing it for free and it takes years?
Yeah, it's like if you have that, if you love it so much where you're not thinking about what someone else thinks, or your family or your friends think about what you're doing. Yeah. It's truly your own thing that you care about.
Yeah.
Is that discernment?
I think another thing too that we've talked about recently more and more is admiration being a secondary consequence. So, for example, the consequence that you're actually after when you're trying to accomplish anything, right, is like, if it's podcasting, sharing ideas,
sure,
getting better 1% at a time by talking, you know. The admiration is a secondary consequence of, okay, if people like it over time, then you'll get admiration maybe. Right? But if your first consequence that you're seeking out is fame, glory, admiration, you're never going to be able to have the internal motivation and discipline that's necessary for the years of time that it'll take.
Right. I'd also argue that's like, you aren't truly being yourself. You aren't showing up in an authentic way in whatever you're doing. Yeah. You aren't able to do your best. You aren't able to work as hard. You aren't able to be fully motivated, like you just said, you know, if you're driven by that admiration. Versus on the other side of it, when you truly aspire to do something, you have all this internal passion for it.
Yeah.
Where you don't care what anyone else's think. You're willing to do it for free. You're willing to sacrifice. You're willing to stay up late, etc.
Yeah. And I think, you're completely right. And I think something that like it's interesting. We have to choose our language very carefully, but like admiring's not a bad thing. Right. I don't want to put that into like in our minds or into other people's minds is like, I have admiration for so many different people.
Sure.
But then I also say to myself equally, well, I don't want their life.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. I think it's we should talk about that. Like, why is it not a bad thing? Like, we should have mentors or people that inspire us to do better. And especially in a time where we're continuing to look for what your calling is, what your thing is. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to look for external things.
Yeah.
I'd say we're both still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And it's very common, especially, in a younger generation is trying to figure it out. And a great source for that is to try new things by being inspired by another. So that's why admiration isn't a terrible thing, but I think it also needs to be backed with action of like, okay, let's just experiment with it. Like, let's try it.
Yeah.
Instead of just admiring and sitting on the sidelines yourself. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Completely. I want to ask you a question too, kind of going back towards, and it's what you just said about admiring people and looking at them as mentors, especially when you're trying to figure out where you belong, what the thing is that aligns with your values, your passions, and what you're good at.
Yeah.
When it comes to work, right, we talked at the beginning of how do we discern between admiration and aspiration is there's things that you would do for free if nobody watched, if nobody listened. When it comes to picking out like what we do for work, right, it seems that in a physical world, there is a trade-off between like, hey, like, okay, I have to survive, have to pay rent, have to, pay for groceries, etc. I think that people almost like, you should put so much value into this, idea of aspiring to be whatever that thing, figuring out what that thing is. And like the secondary almost is like, okay, money.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Right.
As opposed to like a lot of times, and I've done this, is that what I looked at, you look at jobs when you're a kid in college, you look at majors and you say, well, this person makes $80K salary.
Right.
I want to be like them, right? They make $100K salary because what's driving me is social acceptance, monetary value, etc. Security.
Yeah.
Versus would I be it's like you talk to people that are doctors, this is just an example. Would they be a doctor if they were just volunteering and doing it in their free time?
Yeah, if they weren't paid.
Be interesting. I don't know. It's just an interesting conversation.
Yeah, it's like, would you do your job that you have today for free?
Yeah.
I think that's a question you need to ask yourself. If it is something where you're motivated, you believe in it, you're curious, like you're growing, whatever that thing. There's so many different things you can like about a job. Would you do it for free? I think is a great question, and maybe it's something that we have to find. What's something I'm willing to do for free?
Yeah,
and how can I find my career purpose or calling, whatever we want to describe it as that marker.
Yeah, and
then try to figure out how to build security and safety around that, because maybe it means taking a job for less money. Let's say.
I was going to say too, I think that in today's environment as well, based on what you just said, more and more, if you do something for free, like a hobby or a passion, consistently, continually, and you build around that, I do believe that you can build stability and wealth and, a lot of the secondary things that we talked about that might gain you admiration that we talked about.
Sure.
But the only way that you do that consistently for a long period of time is if you have that internal motivation, discipline to do it through, this is something I actually enjoy doing and I would do no matter what.
And like we've said, was it 2 episodes back of the Paul Graham essay? Right. Is it something that interests you, that you have room to push yourself and challenge yourself?
Yeah.
and something that you're actually uniquely suited for. Like that's the sweet spot right there.
Yeah. I think it's just so interesting how, and this isn't wrong. This is just questions that I have. Like we said, it's like getting out of college. A lot of those conversations, I think, were for, majors in college, or, you're coming out. It's like, okay, I'm picking something I have to do for the rest of my life.
Right.
At 22 years old. And a lot of it is driven by, well, what industry is stable? I won't lose a job. What industry is, I get paid enough.
Yeah. Or where can I get a job?
In general.
Yeah.
But rarely is people's first desire, like nobody's coming, like it's not the regular thing for people to come out of school and be like, oh, I'm going to do whatever just to make a living. And then everything is going to be geared towards, in my free time, aspiring to be actor, athlete, entrepreneur, etc. That's a very rare idea or thought, I think, for young kids coming out of school.
Right. Well, it's just not like the college experience is never, I don't know. I feel like I just did an experiment when it comes to my major.
Yeah.
To really, challenge myself in different subjects comparatively to, I just chose one.
Yeah.
And it's what ended me in that career. So,
yeah.
I think it's an interesting question. I think that it can apply to many things. I think it can apply to career, passions in life, to interest in life, to many different stages too in life.
Yeah, completely. And I think, like you said, things change over time, and it's important to always reevaluate. Okay, maybe what you thought you wanted at 30 isn't what you want at
Maybe it was
40.
something you were admiring.
Yeah.
You were admiring someone else. You were admiring a paycheck, or, an external thing,
status.
A result, a status, safety, when really you were aspiring for something completely different.
Yeah. And I think that's the important part too when we're talking about like what it is, especially for us in our 20s. It's like the way that I've gained a lot of value, especially from a career perspective, is actually doing those things. In college, a lot of it is, oh, here's a textbook, here's a pamphlet of jobs that you are well suited for.
Sure.
And you pick off of a page based on, oh, that person does that, cool. The minute that you get into the day-to-day, oh, this is what they really do. And so I think that that's where it leads back to a lot of our themes, which are taking action to find out what you actually aspire to become. You have to go do that thing, and at the end of the day, be like, would I do that every day for free? Do I love it that much?
Yeah.
And you'll pretty quickly find out, like, yes or no.
I love that. I think that's a great how potentially for us. So, like, what are some hows where we can discern what are admirations of ours versus aspirations?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing, which we kind of talked about a little bit, is like maybe start with why. A little Simon Sinek on like why, what are the driving forces behind why I'm wanting to do this thing? Is it truly that I love it and I would do it for free? Or is it for the money, status, stability?
Yeah, that's the core. That's the core answer of this.
Yeah.
Is what's driving it.
Mm-hmm.
Or the why is what's driving it.
And I think it's okay to not, at the beginning when you're looking at it, it's okay to admit and be like, yeah, I'm doing this for money, to live.
Like, I need to pay my bills. Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
I think there has to be something around, let's say myself or many people being still uncertain about what their thing is, what they're going to do. I think there has to be a how around experimentation, around trying new things. And this is where we can turn to things we admire, people we admire, okay, let me try this new thing, let me try this hobby, let me try this job, let me move to this city, etc. Where we can start to learn, what is it that we like, what is it that we enjoy, what is it that we're potentially good at. And then we can sort out, it's like, why I do this is because I'm good at it, I love it. Compared to why I do this is because it makes me money.
Yeah. I think that's the thing too that we're seeing more and more, which is so awesome and inspiring, is that what you come home maybe, and if you try hobbies, you're like, oh, I really enjoy cooking. People learn that during the
Sure.
pandemic, or coffee, or maybe it's crocheting or knitting, all these different things that you can do, right? It's really cool to see people post that content online, which we're seeing more and more through social media, of like, those people are just doing it every night because they love it.
Right.
And that's kind of where like you begin to kind of see, oh, this is where I'm just doing things because I enjoy this. It's not because I get a paycheck every 2 weeks. It's like, I would do this if nobody watched or if a million people watched.
Yeah, well, it's just doing it to do it.
Yeah.
It's not for any external result.
Yeah.
It's for your own joy of it.
Mm-hmm. So what's our third step? How do we begin to take those steps to, or maybe we experimented already, how do we make that decision on, I should quit this direction? I need to first, and I should aspire to something different.
Yeah. I think we refer back to what we already said is like, ask yourself, like, are you willing to do this for free?
Yeah.
Are you willing to do this? Like, imagine a world where you're already enough. You have everything taken care of. You got the money you need, the admiration you need, the love in your life that you need, etc.
Yeah.
What is it you would choose to do? Yeah. So if you choose to do something, there's very limited choices from there. So it's like, okay, might as well do something I truly love. So I think it's asking that deeper question.
Yeah.
To find out what it is you like to do, compared to making decisions off of money, safety, etc.
Yeah, and this echoes back. That's such a great point and such a great third why. This echoes back to what we've talked about many times, which is, the sailboat of life or the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Sure. Imagine that all those basic needs are met.
Yeah.
You're fulfilled. You are totally set.
Yeah.
Money-wise, housing, etc. I love it. It's like, what is that thing now? Yeah. You don't have to work. You don't have to do anything. You get to choose. What would you do? Mm-hmm. Number one, that is unbelievably inspiring to me that I'm that free to choose that. And also a little bit daunting and scary of like, oh my gosh, I can do anything? Yeah. But I love that's like, I love that possibility that I think most people rarely have the freedom to choose.
I think the exercise is just imagining that.
Yeah.
Cool. So why are we talking about admiration versus aspiration?
This is funny because when all we do is talk about the topics. We never sit down and say what we think. Shane and I don't before we start, the conversations. I hadn't really thought about this in my own personal life a ton.
Sure.
But it did just bring me back so much to, as a child, like wanting to be like a professional athlete. Like my heroes were like,
sure,
people that played for the Cardinals, people that played like at Real Madrid, it's like different sports people. And it's so true that at that time, what I was really impressed with and loved about them was 40,000 fans every night standing, winning the World Series.
Yeah.
Now, as I grow older, I still admire them entirely, but I want those things for different reasons because I admire so much the dedication, the hard work, the passion that went into becoming a World Series champion or whatever, right? Right. And for me, it's like I have to continue to every day do the things that I love to be a quote unquote World Series champion for me. That might not be a professional baseball player.
Yeah. I think for me, this is kind of what you're saying is like, I just want to truly be my own self.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that is to do the things that I uniquely love.
Yeah.
Or that I'm uniquely good at.
Yeah.
And, that's for everyone. Like, your unique value is your unique value.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that is to do the things that you love. So I think that's forgotten, growing up, let's say.
Yeah. Growing up.
Where, you make decisions off of, safety, security, money, etc.
Yeah.
Or these external things that we talked about, to validate ourselves. So I think that this exercise was a reminder for me as to what's important.
Yeah, completely. let's do a little bit of a recap on admiration versus aspiration. Yep. So first off, we really talked about these two different ideas, where they came from, a conversation between Stephen Bartlett and Rich Roll, which we talked about. It really came from this idea that a young kid walks up to a public speaker and says, "Hey, mister, I want to be just like you." He asks him why. And the kid just, what the reality is that they see all the attention that the public speaker gets and the admiration that people have for them.
And it's something that we can relate to.
Exactly. As opposed to the dedication and discipline that it actually took for that public speaker to get there.
It takes, the passion and love he has for his own craft.
We began to talk after that about, okay, what are the things that determine the differences between the two? And one big thing that we talked about was, okay, would you do it for free if people made fun of you, nobody watched?
Or if you have all your other needs met.
Yeah.
And then we got into our hows. Our first how was really just to start with why.
Yeah.
Why is it you're doing this? And again, it's that exercise of, I love it, I'm good at it, I'm passionate about it, versus making decisions around, external things of validation, attention, approval, et cetera. Exactly. And then our second was, if you aren't sure what your why is, what you're meant to do, what your purpose is, it's not that admiration is a bad thing. It's more that we need to experiment and try new things to find, again, what we're good at, what we love, etc.
Go do it.
Yes. Yeah. And what was our third how?
Our third one was really what you just mentioned, which was, once we've experimented, use almost an imagination exercise of you have all of your needs met, monetarily, emotionally, structurally. What would you want to do when everything is already, all your needs are met? Yeah. And that should tell you probably what that thing is that you love.
It should limit your choices.
Exactly.
And then our why today, mine was just a reminder of how it's super important to be uniquely yourself, to try things that you love, that you're good at, because that's what you're meant to do, versus making decisions off of admiring others and off of external things of, like I said, validation, attention, etc.
Yeah, and I think for me, the why was really almost going back to that childlike wonderment of not disowning admiration, but recognizing that what I really admire and aspire to is to do, like you said, those unique things that I love day in and day out, and figuring out exactly what that is.
I think that wraps another week of
What is Humans.
Thanks, guys.